This episode is sponsored by the Hollywood Casino at Charlestown Races in West Virginia. Must be 21 to enter the casino floor and attend a show. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. It's a happy Halloween as John Carpenter's iconic 1978 film Halloween returns to movie theaters nationwide. I spoke with Nick Castle, who played the iconic villain Michael Myers, about creating a horror classic. Hey, Nick Castle. Hey, thanks so much for joining us today.
You're welcome, Jason. Nice to talk to you.
We are so excited to welcome you, everybody. Nick Castle, who, of course, played the iconic villain Michael Myers in Halloween, the 1978 John Carpenter classic, which returns to 600 theaters across 40 markets this week for Halloween. Let's start with your performance. I mean, obviously, you're donning that William Shatner mask, painted white with the eyes cut out, all that stuff. But I want to know how you went about creating that slow head tilt stuff. This was long before Undertaker and Kane were doing it in the ring. Do you remember talking to John Carpenter about that, or which sort of body movements did you bring to it?
Well, most of the things were instinctual. This wasn't an iconic character at the time, obviously.
Yeah.
So it was just John thought of something about my walk looked a little sinister, I guess. The head tilt was all him. I was standing there during the course of that scene, and he just shouted out, "Hey, Nick, tilt your head." I had no idea what he was doing, but then when I saw the dailies, I said, that's kind of cool. The killer is admiring his kill.
And how much of it was in the directing too? Not just John coaching you and the actors, like you just mentioned, but John's framing of the shots too. There's one scene that always jumped out to me as powerful. It's like a kitchen foyer or something where he's shooting at, you're seeing one of the teenagers and there's no one behind them in the door window behind him when you first see it, but then the camera pans away and then when he pans back, you're in the frame. So talk about how important the framing. He's very intentional in how he frames these jump scares.
Well, yes, I think a lot of what makes the movie great is John's ability to use some of the knowledge that we all gleaned. I went to film school with him, from past movies like Hitchcock and great artists like that, to figure out how to use the camera. His framing is great. How to anticipate the character, how to make sure that don't see him, then see him. There's a great scene at the very beginning of the movie where it's done all in one take, like Touch of Evil. So there's a lot of influence from the classics of motion picture history.
Absolutely. Touch of Evil was Orson Welles, but Hitchcock had a lot of those great one take too. Rope was basically all one single take. And talk about the fact that Carpenter added music too. He's the one. There's not many movies. I mean, Hitchcock's the master, but Hitch didn't write his own music. That was often Bernard Herrmann. But here in Halloween, man, your guy John Carpenter is not only directing and stuff, but he's also writing that famous piano theme. The dun 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 dun. Talk about how much you thought that brought it to life, because you couldn't imagine that when you're filming it on set, but describe seeing it with the music for the first time. That must have been oh my God, goosebumps.
Well, yeah, as a matter of fact, I was just talking to the person that edited the movie and also invented the mask, Tommy Lee Wallace, and he said when they first saw the movie cut, they said, "Oh, that's pretty good." And then when they put the music on, they went, "Oh my God, this is really working." And of course, John, God knows how he put this all together, but he wrote that theme in 3 days. And he always had the idea of doing a theme in 5/4 time, 4 or 5. I forget how the musical notes are put together. But he, his father was a musician and a music teacher, so he grew up in that world, knew it pretty well. And then John and I and Tommy were in a rock and roll band, so we were always playing music together. So that was the origins of his the John Carpenter genius.
It really is a genius when you look at his whole filmography. And maybe we can go into a little bit towards the end of this, but sticking on Halloween for a second. Yeah, that theme is not, and everyone remembers the main theme. It'll still play on Halloween, in commercials and everything to this day. But I was just walking through it, my dog through a college campus the other day, and it was blaring. So there was like some hip hop version blaring through the window. So it's transcended. But not only the dun, 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 not only the main theme, but throughout the movie, like the dun da da, and then there's that weird like tinging, ding 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 ding. I love it. It's iconic. Hey, talk about, you kind of mentioned Hitch a couple times, so I'd love, let's talk about the Janet Leigh, Jamie Lee Curtis connection here. So Jamie Lee Curtis's mom, Janet Leigh, obviously with Hitch pioneered the slasher genre in Psycho in 1960. So that was, I mean, probably the birth of the slasher movie. Maybe Peeping Tom around the same year, but this one, Halloween, don't you think this one was the one that really popularized the slasher, like promiscuous teenager sort of idea? Because you predated what, Friday the 13th and A Nightmare on Elm Street, and of course Scream brilliantly, satirized you, included your face on the TV. But how special do you think that it was that Janet Leigh sort of passed the torch to Jamie Lee Curtis in this one? And I know that, like, a lot of characters are sort of Loomis and stuff are named after Psycho. Like, talk about the Psycho to Halloween connection, especially in the actors.
Well, the idea. Now, personally, I don't know how Jamie was cast, but
Yeah.
it was, of course, brilliant of John to consider that idea. And of course, one, not only was a wonderful connection to her mom, and the and having that connection from Psycho, but she still had to be good. That's the thing.
Right.
You got to remember, she had to be a good actress. Now, she was only 19 when she did it, and this was her first feature film. So there was a lot riding on her abilities, and she just knocked it out of the park. But I got to meet her on the set at the time, and just thought of her as not only a sweet and lovely person, funny, strong, but just an excellent actor right out of the gate.
Yeah, and of course now I guess we should say Oscar winner Jamie Lee Curtis after Everything Everywhere All at Once. Long overdue. That's fantastic. And this babysitter role, and the idea that it's all on Halloween, and oh, is it the boogeyman? Like, do you think that that's part of the immortal reason why it's returns for like these screenings, these 600 theaters you're talking about, is the fact that it's called Halloween, it's set on Halloween, there's trick or treaters, like there's a lot of scary movies we watch this time of year just because they're scary and they're horror movies. But do you think the reason that Halloween kind of lasts so long, and people dressing up in you, etc., is because it's set on Halloween?
Well, yes, I do think that, but it still had to be a very good movie to make it work. The idea that a horror film shot on Halloween about Halloween, has a perennial fascination with people, is no small part to its longevity. It was something, by the way, it was originally going to be called The Babysitter Murders. And then the person that was the head of the studio, Erwin Yablans, came up with the idea of Halloween. So that was genius. There's a couple of genius things in this. One is that. It just makes that. And then the mask. I think the mask itself lent itself to the creepiness of this movie, and goes a long way to adding to the fears and scares that come about.
Absolutely. And not just the mask, but your performance in the mask. I know it's you don't get any dialogue or anything, but in a way that's almost a credit to you, that you were able to, you and John, of course, together were able to sculpt such an iconic character, and do it silently. I mean, it's incredible. And my name's Jason, so there's been Freddy versus Jason, but why has there never been a Michael versus Jason, and talk about another silent killer? I guess Freddy got all the clever zingers, but you had you had to do it without talking. But how would you take on Freddy versus Jason? If there was a Freddy versus Jason versus Michael, why would you, slaughter them both?
Well, Jason has the bigger knife. You got to watch out for him.
This is a knife.
Bigger guys, too. Yeah, that's right. I get to meet some of the guys that play those characters at these horror conventions, and we have a fun time ribbing each other. No, I don't know. That's it's up to the studios to decide how they're going to exploit these shows. But I think the Halloween folks like leaving Michael alone in his own little world. And, you know, I'm very excited to see what they will do with the character in the future. And you know, of course, he died in the last one because it was called Halloween Kills. But, you know, as long as the movie makes money, as long as Michael's out there ringing up the cash register, I'm sure we'll find some other variation of the character.
Absolutely. And you got to do some fun cameos in those new the recent, was it, I guess, like a reboot trilogy kind of a thing, or sequels, I guess, because Jamie's back in them, so he finally killed him, which I thought happened in H2O and all that stuff. So you never say die with Michael Myers. I wanted to ask about, before we move off that original one, I want, because I do want to get to, I did want to ask you about some of your future collabs with Carpenter after Halloween, but real quick, don't want to jump over Donald Pleasance, because such a important part of that movie. Obviously an iconic character from a bunch of old movies, from The Great Escape and a bunch of good stuff. But I love that little speech he gets where he sort of sets the tone for you when he's like, "This blank, pale, emotionless face, the blackest eyes, a devil's eyes." Kind of reminds me of Quint's speech of Jaws, the black shark's eyes, right? But talk about why Donald Pleasance and speeches like that sort of set the tone, sort of, in a way, because you don't get to say any lines, but his lines in a way kind of set the tone for this boogeyman, you know?
Well, yeah, you know, both John and Deborah Hill, who was the producer and co-writer with it, have, you know, just came up with some really good horror story gems, you know, where you can put the character of Loomis in a situation to tell the ghost story and set you up for, you know, what is possibly the motivation for this character or the origins of this character. So that's a lot of fun, and it provides the audience with a lot of mystery. Donald was a great actor coming into the movie. I've got to assume that was a big surprise for him too, to walk into this little movie. I'm sure he was doing it for a few bucks. Probably was a little embarrassed about it, but then suddenly, boom! It's the thing everyone he's remembered for. After all his amazing work through Hollywood and Europe. His European films are amazing.
I love it. Great. Yeah, legend. Well, before we run, I know we're kind of getting a little up against the clock, a couple more minutes left here, but you had mentioned that you went to film school with John Carpenter. I guess, what was it, USC, I guess? Or he was at Western Kentucky and then transferred to USC, I guess. That's where you met him?
Yeah, University of Southern California Film School, about 1968 through 70. We did some movies there. We were both on the crew that won the first Student Academy Award called The Resurrection of Bronco Billy. We both wrote the music for that and sang it. So we had a great old time. We had our own like little vanity rock and roll band back then, and he started his first feature film at USC Film School called Dark Star, which is a great film that, if your fans haven't seen, is a good one to stream someday. It includes more of his music, and it includes his partner on that one, Dan O'Bannon, who wrote Alien. So we had a lot of talented people there.
Absolutely, yeah. And so Dark Star and Assault on Precinct 13 would be the two that would predate Halloween. So Halloween was his iconic third effort. I want to, before we run, I want to remind our listeners that you and John Carpenter reunited a few times after Halloween. So Halloween was obviously a hit, and then I think he named a character after you in Stephen King's The Fog. But you actually helped perform the title song in Big Trouble in Little China in '86. But your biggest collaboration, I guess, was you actually co-wrote Escape from New York in '81. Talk about coming up with that. That awesome sci-fi action idea. It's funny now, and what you guys thought in 1997 would be in hindsight, like watching Back to the Future too or something. But but just talking about coming up with the idea, because Kurt Russell's Snake has become like a cult classic sort of character there before him and John did The Thing. But yeah, I want to know about sculpting that premise, that futuristic idea in Manhattan. It's pretty gold. It's gold, man.
Well, actually, I can't take credit for sculpting the idea because John wrote that. That was his first screenplay out of film school. He wrote it. He kind of put it in the trunk, went on to do his other pictures, and then at one point, after I think he did The Fog, a studio said, "What else do you have?" And he went, "Well, let me look." And he pulled this out, told them the premise. They liked it, and they gave him some money to write the screenplay and do it for real. And at that point, he said, "Nick," he called me and said, "Nick, I need some help on this. I need to bounce ideas. We need to get together. Would you help me? And I said, absolutely, which was a great break for me at the time. So we sat around his pool. We came up with ideas. I think what I added were things like humor and some of the plotting issues and stuff like that with the movie. But I got to give credit to the horror master there to as far as the premise is concerned. I came up with things like the cabbie character, Ernest Borgnine, maybe the very ending, and some of the flow of the picture where we went to in New York to really exploit New York in terms of the fun of the picture.
Awesome. Well, I know that's about all the time we have, but I wanted to remind our listeners that you co-wrote Escape from New York, and then you went on to direct comedies like Dennis the Menace and Major Payne. You co-wrote a music drama, August Rush. So you're multi-talented, but we're here today telling everyone to check out Halloween as it returns to theaters, 600 theaters nationwide, and everyone check out HalloweenPortal.com. Michael Myers, Nick Castle, thanks so much.
You're welcome, Jason.
Thanks so much for listening to Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Our theme music is Scott Buckley's Clarion. Remember to give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time.